What's up, everybody? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're from. Thanks for tuning in. This is what I call the Michale Graves Show. If you haven't hit the subscribe button on the YouTube, hit the subscribe button right now on the YouTube so that you can be notified when I jump on here, whether it's with the Michale Graves Show, whether it's with Grave Diggers Union, with Arturo, and all sorts of other guests, or what have you. I wanted to continue the conversation that I was having with myself the other day on Grave Diggers Union. I was talking about punk rock, and I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to necessarily I have no dibs on punk rock. And what I mean by that is I'm not trying to change punk rock into something. I'm not trying to change metal into something. I'm not trying to change any of these genres, especially punk, because that's what I am associated with. That's where I come from. Especially not that. I'm commenting on it. I'm putting my 2 cents in. I'm continuing my thoughts about the ins and outs and what's happening and what's not, because of my work in the genre, the music that I've contributed, the bands that I was that I was in, the work that I do now, but also because that community at large has made me a pariah and viciously attacked me and canceled me and sent me to the gulag where all of the irredeemables go. Some of you know about that, and you know what I'm talking about. What I want to do tonight, I'm going to get into an article. I'm going to start with an article about Antifa, get into BLM, but it's more about a worldview and ideology, what's in your mind, and the outcome of these things. But I want to especially show you the hypocrisy of all of this, because this for me is also, God forbid I walk out into the middle of the street, get hit by a truck on Route 145. This is going to be a record of my opinions. This is going to be a record of the things that are in my head, the things that I see in a world that we're all in, that we're all contributing to on one level or another. My country is in bad shape. It's in bad shape because truth is out the window. I'm going to get right into it here. I think I can share this. There was an article that was written September 9th, 2017. What are the chances? As today is September 9th, 2022. So 4 years ago, there was this article that was written called No FACIST USA, How Hardcore Punk Fuels the Antifa Movement. All right. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but no Trump, no KKK, no FACIST USA. Remember all that? Well, it was Green Day that started it at the 2016 American Music Awards. Remember, Trump had just been, elected. As political commentators struggle to nail down the exact nature of Antifa's masked legions, they've overlooked one thing. Antifa has been critically influenced by hardcore punk for nearly 4 decades. From the collectivist principles of anarchist punk bands, such as Crass and Conflict, the political outrage of groups such as the Dead Kennedys, MDC, and Discharge. And by the way, it was MDC that started the No KKK, No Fascist USA. Antifa draws on decades of protest, self-protection, and informal networks under the auspices of a musical movement. Mark Bray, the author of the Antifa Handbook, says that in many cases, the North American modern Antifa movement grew up as a way to defend the punk scene from the neo-Nazi skinhead movement. Now, I know a little bit about this. I was the lead singer of the Misfits for a little while. Pretty important punk band. I remember the Nazi skinheads. I remember it. Absolutely down with what was behind the energy behind and the mindset behind, making that those people as uncomfortable as possible and changing the environment to one that is not conducive anymore to any sort of ideology or mindset that is hateful towards your fellow man. These guys would come to the shows and just look to fight. They just wanted to fight and ruin things and break stuff. And when you talk to them, it was all about what you would think it was all about. That white people were more important and above everything and everybody else, all other races. These guys would say it, and they would zeke out in the middle of the street, in the mall, at school, anywhere they wanted. They hated Jews. Everything was the Jews' fault. The Holocaust was not real. Yeah, they believed it. Swastikas on their jackets, right out in the open. Boom. Young guys, young kids, teenagers. Yeah. And I hated them. I knew some of them. I knew some people that believed those things. And it was awful. Dumb. Really dumb. Anyway. So okay, fine. All right, fine. Let's just, that Antifa, that whole mindset was like, all right, let's push back against these fools that outright in the open, they're coming to the shows. They're writing stuff in their fanzines. They have their own bands. Nowadays it's metal. It's metal. It's the metal bands that are neo-Nazis. I don't think that there's much, like Screwdriver. I don't think that there's much. Maybe there is. I don't know. I don't pay much attention or listen to that. All right. So this is Mark Bray continuing. The voice of Mark Bray, as played by Michale Graves. There's a huge overlap between radical left politics and the punk scene. And there's a stereotype about dirty anarchists and punks, which is an oversimplification but grounded in a certain amount of truth. Okay. Drawing influence from anti-fascist groups in the 1930s Germany, the UK-based anti-fascist action formed in the late 70s. Okay, fine. Right. So Antifa is supposed to be what it says. And this movement that is against, fascists, Nazis. I'm down with that. I'm against fascists and Nazis. I'm against it. The term Antifa. Wait, hold on. Let me back up. Drawing influence from anti-fascist groups in 1930s Germany, UK-based anti-fascist action formed in the late 1970s in reaction to the growing popularity of right-wing political parties, such as the National Front and the British movement. They would shut down extreme right meetings at every opportunity, whether it be a march or gathering in a room above a pub. Inspired by this, anti-racist skinheads in Minneapolis formed Anti-Racist Action, which soon gained traction in punk scenes across the U.S. Meanwhile, in New York, a movement called Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice sprung up. The Sharps, the Sharpie skinheads. These were guys that took the aesthetic of the skinhead. You know, the aesthetic of the skinhead came before the political part of it, the radical part of it. It started with just guys dressing that way, listening to, ska music, oi music. In Britain, because there was an influx of Caribbean music, and that sort of influence that then was adopted into rock that became ska and oi. So these guys dressed like that because it was a working class music. It was a working class, middle to lower class thing. That's what they were listening to. And so they wore their boots and they wore the working pants, jeans and the t-shirt, and there it is. Now, there was not, other than whatever politics the individual had, this was not a collective thing that, in order to be a part of, and that aesthetics pushing out, well, I'm wearing this, and so, like identity politics. It had nothing to do with identity politics yet, where, that's a skinhead, he must hate the Jews. That wasn't there yet. So the Sharps, I remember. Okay, fine. I'm down with that too. That's cool. Term Antifa, adopted by German anti-fascists in the 80s, accompanied by the twin flag logo, which then spread around Europe. It finally pitched up in the U.S. after being adopted by an anarchist collective in Portland, Oregon. Now, keep in mind that, fine, the pushback against anti-fascists wasn't from a bunch of, it wasn't Christians, for example. It wasn't just, it was communists. It was communists that hated the fascists. There was these two ideologies that were bashing into one another. It wasn't a bunch of peaceful Gandhi-like people that were marching to the ocean to get their salt. What I'm saying is that one ideology was up against another ideology. It wasn't necessarily based in this, we love everybody. You understand what I'm saying? So, continuing on with our article. For Thomas Barnett, singer with the popular hardcore punk band Strike Anywhere, his punk ethics and the direct action philosophy of Antifa go hand in hand. And with Trump's presidency emboldening the extreme right, the stakes couldn't be higher. I know what is being said there, and that's a little bit of psychological manipulation as well. But okay, for the sake of time, we'll jump over that. Where is it? Okay, so hardcore punk strike. His punk ethics, direct action. Okay, his punk ethics and the direct action philosophy of Antifa go hand in hand. And with Trump's presidency emboldening the extreme right, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just a raft of right-wing ideas, he says, quote, this isn't just a raft of right-wing ideas. This is actual hate and violence and the destruction of entire sections of humanity. Of course, I don't believe in the false equivalence between Antifa and the alt-right. I think anti-fascists' preemptive street violence against Nazis is righteous and important. All right, we have to spend some time on that. And if you just joined us, this article is from 2017. Literally, we're 4 years, 7, 8, 9, 20, 21, 22, 5 years. 5 years to the day. This article called "No Fascist USA: How Hardcore Punk Fuels the Antifa Movement." Important. This is important, and that's why I held on to it, because I go back to this article often. This was one of the first boulders that began to roll down the hill after the music awards when Green Day came out. The leader of the punks. Right? You think of neo-punk. It's Green Day. They're the leaders. They're the leaders of it. You know, they're the number one band. So out comes Green Day with their chant. No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. All right. So, Barnett, the lead singer of the popular hardcore band, punk band Strike Anywhere, says this isn't just a raft of right-wing ideas. This is actual hate and violence. Hate and violence, he's saying. This is hate and violence. This is something that the left, that the official narrative all around us, in the media, in entertainment, in music, in punk rock, in regular rock, in all over, is that violence and hate and right-wing ideas and fascism, and it's this boogeyman. It's really exactly the same play as what had been done and what has been done, what continues to be done against groups like the Jews, specifically in 1930, when somebody like Adolf Hitler used all of the different things that he used and assembled a team to push out an agenda of industrial murder using these same tactics, these same sort of words. Because I was a part of the movement of the early 2000s when Ron Paul ran for president and the Tea Party was just beginning. And I don't remember any violence or hate. It's a lie. It's not real. It's not real. Now, if you're talking about years before in the scene, there was violence. There was a lot of violence in the 80s. But not so much. maybe I missed something because, the punk rock that I knew veered off into this left wing stuff. And then the punk rock that I knew became New York, hardcore, like hardcore rock. And then there was this whole emo thing that seemed to fill the void from that split. So it's not like there was no right wing white supremacist movement, this huge faction of Nazis in the scene. Maybe a few guys, I guess, maybe would come out every now and again somewhere if you're playing in Alabama or Georgia or something. Maybe some bikers. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know where these guys are. Like, I don't know what they're talking about when they're saying, that these, the right wing ideas. Okay, right wing ideas, but actual hate and violence and he says here, and the destruction of entire sections of humanity. Now, I get so up in arms about this because this dude's talking about me. This dude's talking about people that, that are my friends or people that am associated with and was associated with. What is this guy talking about? I was saying the same. I'm still trying to figure it out, what he's talking about all the way back then. I had this article. I got this article out when it came out in 2017 and talked about it and went on the media and wrote. I actually wrote about it too. I did all those things. Yep. I guess so. When you I won't go there. All right. So in the destruction of entire section of humanity. And then he says, of course, I don't believe in the false equivalence between Antifa and the alt-right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what the alt-right is. I'm not a part of the alt-right. I get the alt-right, the alternative right. I'm thinking that the alternative right are just, again, people that would believe, for example, that the Holocaust is a lie. I'm sure that the alt-right has the white supremacist part of it happening. I'm not part of the alt-right. And that's another loaded term when you hear alt-right. Says, I think anti-fascist. Thomas Burnett, singer with popular hardcore punk band Strike Anywhere, who has not been, to my knowledge, banned. I don't think this dude's been banned. I'm sure he still has his social media up. It's all good. I'm sure he has got his Instagram, his Facebook. His band is good to go. There's not many promoters stopping him or Strike Anywhere or any of these other bands that are like this. When he says, I think anti-fascists' preemptive street violence against Nazis is righteous and important. Okay. I literally had band members, people that I cared for, loved, quit my band and give up years and years and years and years and years of not only friendship, brotherhood, but hard work towards all the things that we were all building for, because I was being called, I was grouped in with all this stuff here that our friend Thomas Barnett is talking about. I was being put out there like, we don't know how Michale Graves. He's just crazy. I don't know. He needs to be reeducated. And I can't deal with this anymore. In the mobs of Facebook and the social media mobs, the brainless mobs of idiots came for me. Meanwhile, I'm going, hey, whoa, wait a second. These dudes are saying that again, now it's a lie. It's a total lie, but they're saying that violence against me and people like me or people that are associated with me, that preemptive street violence against Nazis is righteous and important. Did you hear what I said? Now, this is in 2017, and it didn't just go into an echo chamber and go away. But right here in print, and I called it out. Nobody cared back then. In The Guardian. This is The Guardian. Now, I understand that The Guardian's a propaganda rag. But still, dead silence. Dead silence from any band that I was working with, or any of the bands that thought they were in, my community. All these bands that were willing to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to buy on and come tour with me. None of which I ever got, but that's another story. When you bought onto a Michale Graves show, that money was being robbed. That money went somewhere else. Anyhow, there was bands that were willing to pay thousands of dollars. But nobody was paying attention to this because everybody else was just, let's go drink. Let's go, that chick's hot. Well, don't worry, my wife doesn't know. And because nobody was talking about it on their social media, it wasn't affecting them. Any of them. It just wasn't affecting them. That everybody just turned a blind eye to it. That's just Michale Graves and his InfoWars stuff. He's just crazy. Fine. But what are you making music for? Like, what are we doing? What are you doing? You just trying to get rich? All right. Okay. No, man, I ain't trying to get rich. I ain't in it for that. Man. I'm not in it for the money. I just want to rock. Which is bullshit, because if you just wanted to rock, then it wouldn't matter that maybe perhaps your Facebook feed might get interrupted, or, your Instagram might get taken down. There's something else going on that everybody's looking to protect. Getting off on let's get back to this article. So preemptive violence. This dude says preemptive street violence against Nazis is righteous and important. It's hard to get away from that. That's straight up saying that preemptive violence against people that you don't agree with, because you deem them to be some sort of right-wing alt-right Nazi or fascist, that preemptive violence is okay. Which is why I carry a gun. And people around me, when we're out, do too. And I have security. That, both seen and unseen, that have weapons and training, which is crazy that I have to have conversations when I'm away from home and out with people about the protection factor. And it's just, all right, I'm not making it about me. There's other people like that. It's about a lot of other people that I know too. And I'm telling you that it's if you're listening, it's you too. It's about you too. You as well. And that's the whole thing. First they came for the minor. But I wasn't a minor, so I didn't give a shit. Then they came for the guy that did this thing over here. But I didn't give a shit because I wasn't the guy over there. And then eventually they come for you. For you. So preemptive violence, good to go. All right. Now, here we go. Many adopt direct action tactics, whether it be recent Antifa protests across the U.S., the Black block tactics employed during the WTO and G7 protests around the world, or even the decision made by Brace Belden to leave California to join the YPG, the far-left Kurdish guerrilla group battling ISIS. All right, let me back up. Back when the G7 protests and the World Trade Organization was being that was I think it was that the Battle of Los Angeles or something like that. Anyway, I was down with a lot of what was saying, you know, the protests that were happening was a good thing. Was a good thing. But again, that's before a lot of the left-wing money just started pouring into it. A lot of it. Which I went over about a week or so ago. All right. So this is where I'm getting at here. And this is just a specifically, you know, this about this guy. But there's a redundancy in this. A lot of this far left Kurdish guerrilla type, you know, leaving the country to go join the YPG is not just in a bubble. It's not in isolation here. It's not just this dude. There's many examples of it. Andy No. He knows all about it. Has done some great work exposing this. But there are examples. Example after example of these types of people that were fighting for these guerrilla groups that come. They have these workshops. They teach weapons and tactics training, defensive and offensive tactical movements, how to gear up, how to knife fight, how to disarm, and all. And for these types of actions. So as much as you want to say that the right and the right-wing militia doing their things, you are an idiot if you don't think, because I'm telling you, and it's the truth, you're an idiot if you don't understand that the left, again, and is way more funded and able to operate without the likes of the FBI sniffing around. So there's a lot of these dudes and a lot of these connections with these, especially with this, the far left Kurdish guerrilla group battling ISIS. All right, so we're going to get back to we'll get back to the now, you know what? So you say to yourself, all right, well, who's the YPG? Oh, and if they're battling ISIS, see how they just leave it there? Oh, they're battling ISIS. So they must be good. These guys got to be good if they're battling ISIS. So the YPG is connected to something called the PKK. And the PKK is listed as a terrorist organization in the United States and in the EU. However, here in America, we spend tens of millions of dollars arming these folks. Our country denies political and military connections, except for the millions and millions of dollars that we give them to these groups. But we do fund them millions and millions of dollars because they are, we're using them in the fight overseas. I'm not going to get into Abdullah O'Connell, but you got nothing to do. At some point, Google him. I'm not going to do a whole show or nothing on it. I'm running out of time here, but so my point is there's a direct connection to groups that some of these people that then come back and are part of the Antifa movement, or they're part of the Antifa movement or the Antifa idea, or just somebody that is not necessarily wearing the flag or anything, but they are in line with them, and they're part of what Antifa's doing with this. Oh, Antifa is it's just an idea, or it's not real. Until there's 150 of them on that side, 70 of them that are armed, standing in front of you, then it's not an idea anymore. Or a group of them attacks you, puts you in a hospital, and beats you within an inch of your life. Then it's no longer just an idea or made up. But these people are in that movement and have gone and fought and learned from these left-wing organizations. That was the whole thing with Chad. What they're trying to do is set up this whole, government that they're trying to achieve in other parts of the world. Again, where tens of millions of dollars are flowing in to these groups that the United States and the European Union have labeled terrorist organizations. Yet this guy, he goes and he fights for them. The Guardian prints it. He openly says, hey, that's what I did. And that's fine. Let me tell you something. Most of the Proud Boys that I knew, the militia that they fought for, the military that they were fighting for, was the United States of America. They're Marines, they're soldiers, sailors, coasties, National Guard. These people fought, and some of them bled, like my friend Joe Biggs. 2 Purple Hearts. 2 Purple Hearts. Like Ryan Rail, who's sitting in a jail cell, a United States Marine. The VA have taken away. The VA has taken away his benefits and the things that he for doing what? Ryan Rail didn't do anything. So again, my point being is are all the Proud Boys. There's not one that I knew of or heard about that, for example, went and fought for a serious left-wing guerrilla militia, actively fighting, and then coming back here, and then insane. Punk itself wasn't a direct influence on my. This is Barnett talking. Quote, Punk itself wasn't a direct influence on my joining a guerrilla group, of course. But Punk did help to cement my radical politics. Being in a community with a certain degree of consciousness and solidarity between people helped immensely in that regard. This is crazy. I know that sometimes when I talk, it might not make sense. Like maybe I just ramble because I get emotional and my brain is old. A lot of shit's gone down. But listen, this is crazy. I'm going to read it again. Punk itself wasn't a direct influence on my joining a guerrilla group. All right, so it wasn't because he was in Punk that he's saying. It wasn't because he was in Punk that wasn't the direct influence on joining the guerrilla group. Of course, he says, but Punk did help to cement his radical politics. See how that's like, yeah, that's like saying, yeah, no. Being in a community with a certain degree of consciousness and solidarity between people helped immensely in that regard. All right, whatever. Punk absolutely was a direct influence on this guy and joining a guerrilla group. And even though he's saying it wasn't a direct influence, because right here he says Punk did help cement his radical politics. Punk helped solidify my non-radical politics. And push my Christianity, and I'm getting to that. Don't worry, all you believers, all you non-believers. I'm getting to that. I'm taking a little bit long here on this article, longer than I thought I would. But okay, so let's just keep cruising through it. Bands, records, labels, zine writers, and venues around the world have cooperated to create a network that exists entirely outside of the mainstream, providing an off-grid template for Antifa activists to draw from. In America, there is Appalachian Terror Unit, a young band with heavy Antifa leanings from the Trump heartland of West Virginia. In Oakland, Antifa-related punk boy band Hard Left have taken apart benefit shows for protests involved Charlottesville. Texas, Antifa are organizing community relief efforts for victims of the Houston floods. Oh, that's so nice. They must be just darling people. There's definitely an overlap between leaderless politics and the DIY ethos, and the notion that if there's a problem in our punk scene, we're not going to be able to count on the mainstream to necessarily give a shit, explains Bray. But what Bray also doesn't understand, that all of his ideology, and even 2000, it is mainstream. It is absolutely 100% mainstream. And now, literally, Antifa it's like it mimics the Democratic Party and the Republican rhinos of the American government. All right. If there was ever a person who Jello Biafra actually says something that actually has some brains behind it. He says, quote, "I'm not down with confronting the extreme right's provocations of violence with actual violence. I mean, self-defense is one thing, but going to a Trumpist rally with the express purpose of beating up fascists, what does that accomplish? Who's the fascist now? It plays right into their hands." Now, Jello Biafra and I have had several conversations, and the last time I saw him was at an event for the West Memphis 3. Obviously, that we were working together for that sort of thing, and for some of the other things that were, a subset of that, victim rights, representation, a overhaul, an overview, a look at the American justice system and the way that it's broken, and how it's unfair to certain groups and not others. For example, the death penalty. We were advocating for the at least, I was all for a complete moratorium and until we can, as a nation, have this national conversation about the death penalty and things like that. Other things we did not agree with each other on. So I have respect for Jello Biafra, again, because things like this, when he says, "I'm not down with confronting the extreme right, the provocations of violence with actual violence." It doesn't. Self-defense is one thing, but going to a Trumpist rally with the express purpose of beating up fascists, what does that accomplish? Who's the fascist now? It plays right into their hands. All right. So more than ever, we have to keep our. All right. That's more. I'll continue with Jello Biafra. More than ever, because it's a message of nonviolence. More than ever, we have to keep our heads right now, and I'm all about the freedom of speech. But I think protesting these people nonviolently is the way to go, because it lets the targets of the fascist speakers know they're not alone, and lets the fascist who shows up know that there's an awful lot of people who are not down with them. And of course, raised middle fingers is better than showing up with some kind of weapon. Escalating the violence is not the way to go. And, you just keep on throwing this word out, fascist, 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 fascist. Like, I'm not a fascist. I'm not a fascist. I'm one of these people that are on the other side of, for example, disagreeing with Joe Biafra, in many ways disagreeing with Barnett, disagreeing with Billy Joe, disagreeing with Fat Mike, disagreeing with, the list goes on. Where did I want to go here? Okay, I'm going to jump down here to the bottom of the article, and then move on and wrap this up. Barnett says he agrees. Barnett concurs. They don't get to be alt-right. They just get to be digital age Nazis or white supremacists or terrorists. And that's what the media are doing to anti-fascist action, which is just crazy. He says, regardless, Barnett says, the anti-fascist movement isn't taking anything for granted. These rallies, whatever the next one is, whatever form it takes, are Trojan horse events to invite and welcome white terrorist groups, and are just platforms for them to go into communities to hurt and intimidate people. And that's what anti-fascist action has always known, and that's what the punks have always known. Let's back up. For Barnett, even the current terminology is under debate. Calling it Antifa is like calling it this weird exotic cult instead of calling it everyday life. Every aspect of media coverage is insidious, turning public opinion against us, making us violent spectacle that's both something terrible and un-American. When this is the Boston Tea Party, he says. That's just retarded. That's just dumb. I don't have enough time. He continues, if people want to talk about the heritage of American culture and our patriotic destiny fits in to anti-fascism, it's basic math to me and to many, many others. I'm really starting to get the more of a sense that this is not a intelligent person, this Thomas Barnett. Might be wrong. I can't even understand what he's saying. But what I wanted to end with here are these two paragraphs. Regardless, Barnett says the anti-fascist movement isn't taking anything for granted. He says these rallies, quote, these rallies, whatever the next one is, whatever form it takes, are Trojan horse events to invite and welcome white terrorist groups. And he's talking about like Trump rallies. And are just platforms for them to go into communities to hurt and intimidate people, which never happened. None of that ever happened. Whether it was Ron Paul or anywhere, it never happened. There was never this. There were never white terrorist groups that went into communities just to hurt and intimidate people. Or in the bald terms of someone who puts his teenage years in a punk band called War Crime behind him to go fight in an actual war, former YPG militia member Belden says, quote, when I was younger, my friends and I used to beat the shit out of Nazis that would roll out to punk shows in California. And guess what? They'd leave and never come back. Violence works. Violence works. That's how the article ends. He says violence works. Now, other than really, I want everybody to get in their minds the violence that took place all across this country in 2020. And as compared to right-wing violence, I don't know if there are any examples of right-wing violence on the scope that can be shown with the violence that took place in 2020. I don't know. I don't think I'm wrong. Here. Let's watch this. Just to remember. These are the George Floyd protests in all across the country. Here, it's Minneapolis. Not too many Proud Boys. Not too many. I don't see, it looks very angry. Oh, which is fine. That's good. There's an NYPD car on fire. Now all of this went on for all summer. And you had police attacked, police killed, you had people murdered, shot, beaten. There was hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage across this country. Yet none of that violence was from the right, and none of it was being stoked by the right. This was all being stoked by the left. You had left-wing politicians in this country, as well as, just about every major corporation get behind the Antifa BLM movements, which were traditional Stalinist, Leninist, Marxist, revolutionary movements that seek, and not through peace, to create a utopian socialist society, a utopian socialist state by creating conflict. And in order to create conflict, you have to put space between and animosity between races and ethnic groups, religions, different economic and cultural backgrounds. You have to create animosity between the working class and the and the capitalists. You have to take God out of a society. Now, these forms of government, these ideas that are behind the movements that inspired, funded, and put forward into action, into actionable things are these there it is. Are these groups that have these ideas behind them. But really behind them is a whole nother step, part of the Great Reset. Not going to get into it here. Now, these ideologies have killed 20 million people in the former USSR. 63 million or 65 million. It's more than that. 65. All in all, it's about 94,360,000 is the count. It's about 94 million. It's more than that because that count was taken years ago, a lot of years ago. One of the things that is incredibly harmful to all this, and I think goes against the nature of music, is that the nature of music comes out of the liberating spirit of man, or the spirit of man, the yearning to be liberated. American rock came out of the cotton fields of the American South. A lot of people say, well, it came out of church. You know, the people would sing church music and then it's the other way around. In the cotton fields of the American South, the people who were being oppressed, the black people who were being oppressed, and in those fields, there were no radios. There was no television. There were no singing or dancing people for a while until the players, the musicians in the Mississippi Delta that traveled from point to point in the Mississippi Delta to the juke joints. These guys would come and they would play. On the weekends, the performers would gather and they would put on shows for the workers. That music, not only what was being put into that music, but the people that were listening to it, it was balm for their soul, balm for the soul of the oppressed person. And of course, that carried over into church, into the spiritual side of things, because of that connection to God, that connection to our spirit that is connected to the higher power that is God. That is why these systems of government, these ideologies that take God out of the whole thing and replace it with something else, leads nations to destruction, leads individuals to destruction, because their ideologies of wrath and hate and this direct action and this preemptive violence and all this get in your face stuff. Believers, the God that I believe in, when Jesus spoke to his disciples and to the people that were listening to him, it was revolutionary what he was saying. It was revolutionary for him to say, if somebody hits you in your cheek, turn the other cheek, turn away, and love them. Violence begets violence. That was revolutionary, what was being said. We talked a little bit about the Magna Carta the other night. I think I was talking about it on the GDU show. The Magna Carta was revolutionary in that it took the principles, those building blocks of Christianity, not the religious part of it, not the religious part of it, the Word of God part of it, the commandments, those things. It took those building blocks and incorporated it into the social contract. It was a revolutionary thing for someone who was accused of a crime to be considered innocent before being charged as guilty. It was the other way around. It was the other way around, where it was like, well, yeah, you probably did that, and so just throw them in prison and we'll move on to the next, because these people say so. Whoa, not so much. So the spirit that all of us have, that our founding documents, the American nation. I know that there's other people that listen that aren't in America, but our country, very, very young, It's never been done before. We've never done this before. We're just a couple of 100 years old. I've been to places that are thousands of years old. Thousands of years old. We're brand new, man. We're brand new. America doesn't know authoritarianism. It doesn't know tyrannical government in the ways that South America knows, Europe knows. We're brand new. But what we started from and what we strive to be it's that spirit, that same spirit that was in the cotton fields, in that music, that then moved forward in through everything, in the different the different forms of music that came from the blues, that came from that spirit, that was in the churches, that was in the streets, that were in the cars, the railroad cars that the guys would ride. That moved forward into rock and roll and moved forward into punk, into metal, into hip hop and all forms of music, because everybody yearns to be free. Everybody yearns to be free. And every man deserves that freedom and that liberty to have those things and to do what they want with their life and seek their happiness. But with that as well, it's not, I know I'm going over here, I'm going to end it soon here. It's not doest wilt thou will. I think that the devil sign, the satanic church says, doest what thou will, because that's the broad road. Just do whatever you want, man. Because probably when you close your eye, when you get hit by that truck over there on Route 145, it's just lights out, man. So don't worry about it. You got to have fun. YOLO. You only live once. You only live once. So you just do whatever you want, man. Because that's what liberty is. But that's a lie. That's a lie. And that version of things, that way of thinking and that way of seeing the world is so selfish and is such low resolution. There's always justice. There's always some sort of equalizing force. You cannot go through life without rules. There's rules to everything. Science has rules. Physics has rules. For example, physics has rules. As much as you believe that you can fly, if you jump off the roof and flap your arms, you're not going to fly, because there's just hard truths. And so therefore you can't just have it any way. Scripture says that the Holy Spirit comes into our heart, and we're given that discernment. We're given discernment so that we can make these choices, and we know God, so we will not do what we want. And you have to understand human nature to get to that. Human nature is broken. We are broken. What comes out of our heart is terrible things. And the Bible tells us so. Lust, deceit, hatefulness, envious, jealousy, on and on. These things lead us away from the narrow path. That broad road is where most people are. That's where most of humanity is. But that narrow path is the one that believes in Jesus, God, same thing. But you have to believe in Jesus. You have to accept what he did on the cross and understand why. Like a child, You can't come to it in a way where you're going to watch documentaries and put it all together and go, okay, now I have enough proof and there it is. You can't come to it in an intellectual way. It has to be by faith, like a child. The innocence of a child, the way that a child trusts his parent, and knowing that you don't have all the answers. It's not a comfortable thing to walk on the narrow path. Michale Graves is not a good Christian. I can't live the Christian life. It's very, very difficult. And that is why I have the Holy Spirit. Because I'm human. But I am a believer. And I do walk on that narrow path with many others. It's certainly not the whole world. And when you do that, you're walking against the grain. A lot of young people that listen to my music or listen to heavy music, or you think that because you come to God, you come to the Lord, that you have to give up some sort of aesthetic. That you then have to put your loafers on and and you have to your shirt and it's not like that. It's not like that. So I hope that I see all you real soon. You know what? Before I go, let me just look at some of these comments and stuff here, which I haven't. I only wanted to slated about an hour for this, but I went off a bit longer. Again, I wanted to get on here as well, like I said in the beginning, because I wanted to show the difference here, the dueling narratives that are happening. You hear so much about Proud Boys. You hear so much about the right. You hear so much about these Christians that they just hate abortion, and it's really not about the baby. It's about the woman's right, and it's that Christian, and you hear all of this about how bad one side is. To where the president of the United States, the most powerful man, goes to Philadelphia. And with those red lights and everything, further pushes the football down the field of these people are an actual threat to our democracy and what we're trying to do, and they're gonna resort to violence, and they're just the worst people in the world. They can't be elected. They can't be tolerated. They must be stopped. We cannot have them in our society. What are we gonna do with these people? Because along with all of the other things, and the other things I mean by entertainment, by music, by influential people, by the politicians, by the corporations that are bringing us all of these things, the media who are putting out the narratives and the stories and the pictures and the things that people are associating themselves with the way that the world is going. We have been psychologically manipulated into a very bad place. There are behavioral scientists behind this. That is why people like me are shouting from the rooftops, because I'm not a very, very important person. However, I do wield a certain amount of influence and run in the circles. Again, Alex Jones, Owen Schroyer, the Roger Stones types, Michael Flynn, the alternative media, and the Tea Party, the neo-Christian movement, whatever you want to call it. Good people that just want to be left alone. I wield a certain bit of influence amongst that small group of Americans. And I was targeted, attacked, and completely canceled. Everything was taken away from me. And I was blacklisted again from working with certain people. So, you know, there's the people wouldn't work with me because then even still, well, you're too political, and well, you know, there's a certain sort of stigma, and it makes it difficult, and you're a nice guy and all, but there's too much conflict. There's people, they don't want to touch me with a 10-foot pole. They'll talk to me behind the scenes, but you know, in front of the scenes, it can't happen because I'm, you know, Proud Boys and a defendant for the Proud Boys at January 6th and all that. But it's just a lie. It's just a lie. And so that's all I got for you. I appreciate your comments here. I see some familiar faces. I appreciate you all very, very much. And we should be back on here. I should be back on here Sunday with Gravediggers Union. So I hope to see everybody then. You know, until then, take care. Thanks for tuning in.
Old dark house, pride in me. Sometimes I think I want